There's no need for questions. Yes.
I listened to a podcast where Ed Miliband was discussing land value taxation and St George's ideas.
Yeah.
Ed Miliband, and this was a few years ago when he was still
leader of the party.
Yeah, he was a leader. I think he just finished being the leader.
Right.
But why do you think that this knowledge, apart from the sort of general short-termist situation that politicians find themselves in, why do you think this is not more commonly understood and acknowledged and accepted wisdom?
I mean, more people know about it than they let on. I mean, actually, just so for everyone's kind of information. So when Henry George in 1879 talked about the boom bust cycle, he also proposed how you resolve it. And to do that, you take off the tax on wages and sort of business profits, like business risk, and you put it on the things where the owner of a particular asset doesn't do anything to contribute to the value. So principally land. So the value of a piece of land is because of the surrounding roads and buildings and stations and so on, local amenities, presence of population. And so when property prices go up, it's actually the value of the land that's going up. That's not something that should be privatized. It should be, it's a communally generated, and so that's what should be used to fund the government, and actually it resolves the issue of inequality as well. So it's sort of two solutions in one. So everyone in the late 19th century knew about this. Henry George is still the most widely read economist in history, but no one's read him for about 70 years. But the Liberal Party, so the Liberal Democrats, they have got a number of people who understand the argument. I think there are people in the Conservative Party and clearly the Labour Party that do. I think when you actually start to propose it, you then really run up against those who are already in charge. And I think Tony Blair might even have admitted that this is one thing that you just can't propose because you run into all sorts of problems. I also document in that particular chapter that the entire sort of discipline of economics was changed to, quite deliberately and quite explicitly, as a attempt to discredit Henry George. So they took land out of economic analysis. Land is a distinctive factor of production, so that no credible economist from then could propose it as a credible solution because they didn't have the analytical tools. And so not only are you fighting against entrenched interests, it's not just in the UK or the US, it's in a lot of different countries. You're also trying to do so with one hand tied behind your back because you can't, people don't necessarily accept the terms of the debate, and so the discussion becomes very fuzzy and not very clear. And also, I mentioned that everyone in the late 19th century read their Henry George. It's not the case now, so it doesn't have the resonance with the population, so there's no sort of popular mandate. So those are, I think, three quite significant issues. My fear is that if you don't accept this, which I think would resolve everything very sort of very easily and in a way that doesn't involve overturning our sort of entire sort of economy. My fear is that when you do get a crisis, you do get politicians and other people, leaders, demagogues, who say, well, here is another solution, and it's usually much more revolutionary. And when you unleash those forces, who knows where you end up. The 1920s Russia was an example of that.
Are you still writing newsletters?
Yes. Phil and I are still, we've got a nice, somewhat small following, so please do add to it. So we have a free newsletter. We have and we do podcasts and other things, and we also have a subscription service.
How do you think economists resolve the fact that economics, as it's taught, doesn't work? Because having worked in the city and seen the economists making prediction after prediction that doesn't work, I was always I was always struck by the fact that they never seemed themselves to learn, to go back and say, well, what could be wrong with this? And what your book's done is explained it. But they've never done that. And I always think these are really smart people, these are good people, why don't they learn? It's a difficult question.
I don't know. A good question. I mean, but in a lot of walks of life, there's I don't mean this in a overly negative way. There's maybe lack of accountability.
Well,
You don't have so much skin in the game. You can say things, and it doesn't really matter if it's right or not.
But it's also an interesting psychological trait that people don't seem to remember what they've said before.
Yeah, true.
And they just waited for the next forecast, or the forecast's always a year out, sterling's going to be here, and when it isn't, there's always a reason, a good explanation that seems to come around as to why people don't quite go the way they expected, but they still want the next year's forecast.
And there's always the sort of on the one hand this, on the other hand.
Yeah.
Ceteris paribus, other things being equal, and so on. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it is. I mean, it is a. I know now, having put a lot of forecasts out there and to put my reputation such as it is on the line. I mean, it is a thing to put a forecast out and stick by it and not change it and have to live with it. And people only ever remember the wrong ones. They don't remember the right ones.
Well, if they're right, they sort of claim it was their idea anyway. If they're wrong, they blame you.
Yes,
That's how it can be.
But in a rising market, then it was down to them. Right?
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, Gordon Brown being the most famous example in recent times of where the cause of this boom, and then when it crashed, the month after he said we've ended boom bust and it crashed, then it was the global economy that was at fault.
Yeah.
And so you've got that, but it is the chapter 5 is a remarkable thing, because it's literally you're taking away people's words, and so they can't even talk about it anymore. And the criminals involved with it, if you're into any conspiracy theories at all, I found this one has been great in the last few years, because it was actually a Rockefeller who did it, right? Who took the rent that he got, the excessive rent he got from oil, which is another thing why he got so rich is kind of weird, really, that one person got so rich, and then he used that money to turn economics literally upside down. And that it used to be economics, the biggest problem in economics, according to Smith, Ricardo, all the others, as you'll see in the books and in this book, is it was always about freeloaders. You've got to stop, everybody's got to contribute. So if we're in a community, everybody contributes. And if you don't contribute, you've got serious problems, because we're all looking at you going, mate, you need to get, you need to do something for us all, because we're a community. And that's what a community is. It's everybody contributes. And so the economics got turned upside down. So that now became the pinnacle. Whether it's just your passive income, right? That's another perverse way of looking at how do I get money for nothing? How do I get other people to create value that I can capture? And if you look at the city, that's really what you've got now. And one of the books that isn't ours, but there's Michael Hudson has written a fabulous book about the difference between financial capitalism and industrial capitalism. I think it's called the Decline of Civilization, or the End of Civilization, something like that. Something cheerful, right? But it's basically the end of Western civilization, because nobody else is doing this. And I think the opportunity is that there's other nations. My vain hope is I look at other nations, whether you look at African nations, you look at some of the nations in Asia, they're much closer to the ideas around Henry George, around, if you sit down with my background's Japan, and if you sit down with someone in Japan about the importance of community, they look at you not just, why are you telling me this? It's like, well, why are you telling me this? Because I know this already. Our society is built on this. So there's much more of a sense of what you and I and what we create is where the value is, and that you've all got to take care of that. And I think that what we're really facing is the decline of the West. And this is what's going to do it. Is that's not the book, but just it's all Akhil's fault, right? It's his fault that we're going to be. So think about it. In 2030, when you're all poor, find him, and he'll be on some billboard as James Bond.
Billionaire.
But no, and it's our chance to get on it, make some money and protect your family, and then start telling everybody else, which will sell the book, but it will also inform more people. Is there any more, before we all go, and I've just been calculating how much wine there is left.
You'll
And we could get kind of tipsy, I think. More questions? Yeah.
So, I'm a property developer, as Akhil knows. It's always easier to see faults elsewhere. It's very difficult to acknowledge them with yourself. And so the idea of land value taxation always sits a bit uncomfortable with me, I have to say. I'm not a complete denial, but equally I'm not, I guess, open-minded would be the wrong way to describe it. But talk to us a little bit, Akhil, about the economic rent relating to oil, because that I can appreciate. Great value comes to those, to use a Henry George expression. Let's do the whole thing. It is a well-provisioned ship, this on which we sail through space. If we open a hatch, there is a new supply. Great command over the services of others come to those who, when the hatches are opened, are permitted to say, this is mine. That's what he says about land, but talk to us about oil. If you say the oil is mine, what are the benefits and how do you solve it with economic, what's the situation with economic rent?
I mean, there are a couple of countries that have. So Norway is a very prime example, had a massive oil field, and they took the rents of that and they pooled it in a fund, which is now worth, was it over $1 trillion, which is used to provide dividends to citizens, which is used to fund infrastructure, which is used to do all of the sorts of things that make, I think Norway quite a cohesive society. We had even bigger oil reserves at the same time, and what did? We used it to sort of cut taxes and so on. And now we have a lot of questions about how do we fund the further development of all of our infrastructure. So I mean, there are many sort of strong examples of. I mean, even Alaska does something similar to Norway. So there are many strong examples of how these resources are the heritage of all of us as human beings, and they can be exploited well, prudently. You can put whatever restrictions that kind of follow environmental regulations around them, and they can be used to fund our further development, and do so very successfully and very easily. And yet we seem all of us incapable of putting them together. And sort of just to add as a property developer, I mean, the biggest cost. I've done a couple of. I didn't see it through to the development, but the biggest cost is actually the cost of land, and you often have to borrow and pay 5% interest for the entire process. I mean, it's an enormous additional cost. If you had a land value tax, the actual cost of the land, because it has an obligation to pay out as you occupy that piece of land, the cost of that land is zero. And so the economics of actual development of good buildings in nice locations becomes, I think, much stronger. In addition to which, in any given city, at least 20% of the buildings are underutilized or empty at any given point in time. The idea that we have some shortage of homes is utterly ludicrous. It's just that we don't have homes available in the market at any given point in time. That would be incentivized by such a tax. And what you would need is people to fix those places up and so on. And I think there would be an enormous construction boom. So you'd be in a very good position to marshal your team, to find some great deals. You won't have to buy the land. You won't have to borrow as much as you would, and so you'd be doing very well.
We're just rewriting Don Riley's Fred Harrison's book called Taken for a Ride. I don't know if you ever read that.
Well, I bought one of them today. So
Okay, right. And the thing that strikes me is how honest he was. And he was a property developer back in the 80s and 90s. He had some land around London Bridge, and they announced the Jubilee line, and he made a fortune out of it. And he said, that's wrong. He said, I'm an entrepreneur, I make my own money, and that's not mine. And so that shouldn't happen. And he wrote a book about it with Fred Harrison about the wrongness of it. And it's if we're able to get back to what an entrepreneur really is, which is to create value where it doesn't currently exist, to make connections that make that deliver value, the genuine entrepreneurship, then you can sit back at the end of the day and say, I did that, rather than I just made money when I've got lucky, or the system's corrupt and I'm benefiting from it. And so that for me is really the standout thing for me.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah, I have a question. So okay, we first met probably, I was trying to work it out just now, probably about 18 years ago. I was working in the Treasury.
That's
And,
right, it was in the pub.
Yeah, it was in the pub, in the Treasury, and it was we just I was working. I think Gordon Brown was the Chancellor, and we just ended Boom and Bust, so that went well. But it was also just before you, by the you were giving the timeline of your involvement and your thinking about this. I just just the timing was wrong because I was working. If you'd only had these ideas earlier, you could have we could have sorted something else.
My conversation
But
in the pub.
yeah, but looking to the future as well. If you think with a kind of political slant, if you're saying there's a big crisis coming in a year or two, and we had the presidential cycle in America, are you then predicting a nice Trump victory and a massive crisis?
I mean, I think people have done enough to, including Trump, has done enough to ensure he won't be re-elected. But could be wrong. So Trump would really push the cycle into overdrive. He would, he already tried once, and then he said so there's kind of two kind of peaks in the cycle. There's a mid-cycle peak, and then there's an end of cycle. And usually you get someone with not very intelligent at the peak of each of those saying, this is a boom like we've never seen before. And actually it was Trump in January 20 in Davos who said that the World Economic Forum meeting, he said, the US is in the midst of the boom, like which we've never seen before. And Phil and I looked at each other and said, right, this is the peak. This is it. We were expecting a mid-cycle recession. The global economy was slowing in late 2019. Obviously COVID came in and exacerbated that, but actually the response to COVID meant it was the shortest recession in history as well. So Trump would be quite good from my point of view because firstly, I'm actually fairly rude about him in the book. So that would be good for sales, and then also he will almost guarantee a really sort of clear repeat of the cycle. But I don't know if I don't think he's going to get re-elected, to be honest. It's too many issues, too much baggage.
I honestly think all bets are off, mate.
Well, it's true.
This is just going to be the wildest. I mean, there's a curse in Chinese. May you live in interesting times.
No, exactly.
And we are doing. And this is well, thankfully it's not a war, but it's just going to be a whopper. So Now, so just to go back, Fred Harrison did have a communication with the Labour government, and Alistair Campbell told him to cheer up. Much to Fred's disgust, right? And that was really when the crash happened, and I had some friends at the Treasury and said, Fred, can I, and I was just sitting on a lot of debt, and he's like, look, it's like, can you do a summary for people at the Treasury? So, because it's like, look, he said, I've sent them the book already. He said, so they can read the book, right?
I can tell you, December 13th, 2006. The Bank of England had a seminar, all-day seminar, which Fred and I were at. And they put Fred on at the very end. And Fred did his projections, and I saw it. And there's some very, very smart, I mean, they're not idiots, these people are working in the Bank of England and the Square Mile and everywhere else, and I know in the US the same, all the market analysts. But Fred told them, he said quite clearly, this is the top. After 2007, things are going to turn out. Every single person in the room laughed. Absolutely, every single major economist that was there. Some really big guys that were working for the Bank of England. He brought total laughter to the room. I mean, it was just staggering.
He's never been known as a comedian, so first time.
So no, it will repeat. It'll be the same again.
So here's the other thing, mate, about who gets in. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, true.
Right. So if you think about what Keir Starmer's saying about the UK, we're going to have for the working people, we're going to have a housing boom because there aren't enough houses, so we're going to go all in. And then the Conservatives, I don't know what they're saying, but I mean, they're bankers, so they're going to print more money, and there's going to be some more development. So, and in America, it could be Trump, right? I mean, no one believed he would get in the first time, so why not? Quite frankly, and the way in which that now the information is so distorted on either side, you just don't know what you're getting anyway, do you really? But this will turn and it will happen, and that's the thing. That when I was with Phil, I was messaging Phil a while ago, a couple of years, maybe 18 months ago. I'm like, mate, this cannot be turning. So it cannot be coming back. Mate. It's got to. The cycle's got to have been broken by COVID. So John, it hasn't been broken. It's just going to keep turning. It's going to keep turning. And then a few months later, I went walking around London and looking at the extraordinary development that had taken place. Not one empty shop, all Asian money coming in, Chinese restaurants, Korean restaurants. Oh, and I just messaged. I not even rung him. I think I messaged him and said, "All right, mate, you're right." It's just going to keep. It's just going to go. And it's having sat on the sidelines of watching these guys make forecasts that are frankly impossible. As someone with an economics degree, you can't do it, but they've done it, and Fred's done it, and it's just 2026. You're going to come off the biggest boom, so you've got to make your money and get out to a safe place so that you can come back in at the right time to protect people. In the West, that's going to be a real challenge.
A few bullet points.
No, so I mean, I think one of the dangers is to sort of overreact to kind of this. So, I mean, typically what happens, people rush into government bonds and so on. But if you have good quality property in a good location where you've got nice tenants and so on, I mean, they might go down in value, but if you don't have to sell, it doesn't matter. You just kind of keep collecting income. There'll be something different, probably maybe Bitcoin suddenly has its day as a new form of money. Sorry?
Iron and copper.
Iron and copper, yes, maybe Australian and New Zealand. Actually, a lot of billionaires are buying property in New Zealand. Have you not kind of driving up property prices in lots of these? So there are sort of, I mean, there are areas where you can see that people are preparing for a sort of major downturn. But it's certainly not the case that you need to sell everything and head for the hills. Just make sure you don't buy lots, particularly borrow to buy lots just before. That's the really problematic thing, because then you're forced to sell. When you're forced to sell in a downturn, you really get in trouble.
So unless there's a really pressing question, I'm going to wrap it up here, and then we can finish off the ones. I think we're out by 8 o'clock. Is that right?
Yes, you've got 18 minutes to...
18 minutes. I think the quota is everyone has to drink half a bottle of wine. So if I can say, big round of applause.
Thanks for watching. Want to know more? Join our Property Cycle Investor newsletter. You'll get exclusive access to our new uploads on YouTube. Click here to watch our other videos. Thanks for watching. Want to know more? Join our Property Cycle Investor newsletter. You'll get exclusive access to our new uploads on YouTube. Click here to watch our other videos.